I've been mainly working on Rhythm Generator for the last couple of months. So, how you might incorporate into your practice regimen? I mean, do you mean how you might use it, or?
Yeah. So I first was introduced to PolyNome in the area of polyrhythms. I play saxophone, guitar, and flute, and so I got into drums and what do you call the what are the basic building blocks for learning drums? The rudiments.
Yeah.
But I was hitting a forum, I remember, to try to understand 5/4 or just some, how could I apply these polyrhythms to a homophonic instrument, just a melody instrument. How can I
Mm.
understand them? Rhythm was my weakest link. I've always been fascinated about harmony and melody, but rhythm, I needed to get a handle on, and there was no app that could really clearly show that. And your app was the first one, so I was on board right as soon as I found out about it, probably
Mhm.
5 years ago. So now with this rhythm generator, um, and incidentally, I finished a gig on a cruise ship. A lot of sight reading was at hand, and on multiple instruments. And the biggest criticism I probably had with my sight reading chops weren't where they really should be. You got to make pretty snap decisions, and especially in the area of offbeats and accents,
Mhm.
those kinds of things, mnemonic type of the way that you have the audio ability to change the audio, the timbre and the all those things are useful from a horn player's perspective in mixing with an ensemble, that you're
Mhm.
hitting the same kind of articulation. So anything that could amplify the rhythmic aspect of a horn player or a single note player in hitting with the drummer and doing the same hits, I clearly needed to work on that. And so with the randomizer, challenging myself, say in a just not a crazy Frank Zappa kind of Black Page kind of approach, but just simple. Let's really understand, 5/4, and give me all kinds of different iterations of 5/4. For example, if it could do that, I could see that as a benefit for someone like myself.
Yeah. So when you say 5/4, are you talking accenting every fifth, 16th note in 16th grid, or are you talking about playing quintuplets?
Probably the former. The thing that made your app different, the first app, was the two lines.
Mhm.
So being able to visually see it, but then audibly hear it, and hear the pulse of the one against the other, or focus on it, and your mixer control to bring one or the other. Maybe,
Yeah.
I could baby step into, okay, take the pulse away and see if I can feel. All these kinds of things were really powerful to me
Yeah.
in comprehending. But with the generator, now give me, aside from, so, and I would usually hit you up for support and say, okay, well, what would that look like on paper? Or this feeling. I remember one instructor at Berkeley was trying to impart on the class that what you think are triplets, what you think is jazz feel, swing, is not the way you're playing it,
Mhm.
or the way you understand it, or maybe you've heard of it as triplets, or even a quintuplet, whatever. He was able to enunciate it and play it, and it was different. And you put that then down on the PolyNome. So let's say with 5/4, two lines, and I still may not understand it completely, but I do understand the like five tuplets in the space of uh, two beats, what that might sound like. But what about a bona fide polyrhythm, um, where you just have completely different rhythms happening at the same time? If that could be randomized and give me, I don't know, unlimited, infinite variations of that. Now I'm kind of got the understanding of that together, perhaps.
Um, so rhythm generator is just a single line of rhythm and
Okay.
was geared more towards the idea of either challenging your sight reading, and also keep in mind that I had to basically generate all of the possibilities. So let me go ahead and load this up. So the way this works under the hood is the difficulty levels here are pulling from this custom note choices, which has, quarter note rest and a quarter note, and then eighth note rest, the different permutations of all of these groupings. So, and I chunked them up like this. So I have the 16th, all of them at the top, and then one note permutations, two note permutations, three note permutations, because there are a lot when you get to the quintuplets and the sextuplets. There are a lot if you put them in one big long list. Um, Now, they are written from a kind of a drummer's perspective where the actual length of the note is not something that we think about that much. So rests are consolidated and notes are rests are consolidated where possible into notes. So um, that's probably clearer with the two note permutations here. So, you could play something like this, the one and the E of the 16th note, and you could play one E and then have an eighth note rest, which sounds different to one E where this is a dotted eighth, which you'll obviously be more aware of as a melodic player because this note has different duration to this one. But when you're playing on a practice pad and you're just hitting the rhythms, you're just kind of thinking about the accent places, then this is a neater way to write one E, one E. So all of the options in here are they only show rests if the rest appears on a pulse on the kind of downbeat of the quarter note. So when you get down to the quintuplets, let's look at these. So these are things that even drummers wouldn't be that familiar looking at, but the only time that you'll see a rest is if it's on the start of the grouping. So it's not all of the possibilities, but it's all of the rhythmic possibilities of, which partials you can hit. So if you've got five notes in the space of a quarter note, these are all the two note options that you have available, and they're in a specific order. And part of the reason that I laid them out this way was so you could create exercises. So let's say you want to get more familiar with quintuplets and feeling comfortable with the quintuplet. A good way to do that is to work through all of the one note permutations first. So I can clear all at the top and then just let's turn on the full quintuplet here and then all of the one note permutations. So if I expand this, these are all now checked. And then if I go back to the rhythm settings and I choose, we're in time signature 4/4, so that's going to give us 4 beats worth of that. If I go to training mode, ordered, that gives me all those selections and it plays each one for an entire bar. So you get a full bar of quintuplets and then you get a full bar of just the first note, the full bar of just the second note, the full bar of just the third note, etc. So if I play this, this is a good exercise to work on. But now when it's playing this, you've got to keep that quintuplet division in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then on the last one. So, and some of those might sound very similar to partials of triplet or partials of sixteenths. And it's not that people would really notice, but I think when you were talking about the swing thing, drummers have, or anybody, when they're playing a shuffle, like 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, what I'm playing now is not necessarily exactly a triplet. It might be divided into quintuplets and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. You know, there's differences like that, and you could bring them up in here to highlight them. You could go to edit those custom levels. So if I create an exercise that uses different things that could sound like a shuffle. So the first one, let's just put a straight eighth in. And then 16th notes, sometimes you can think of swing as the first and last of a group of 16th notes, so 1 and and then with the 8th note triplet, the 1 and the let of that, which is your typical kind of what is taught as a shuffle. And then you could go to the quintuplets, 2-note variations, and probably the 1 and the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. So that is going to be this one. So if I put those up as an ordered, let's just refresh this, ordered training. Now we've got straight eighths and then 3 kind of variations on how you might feel a shuffle. So I can play each bar maybe twice just so we get a bit more of it. So straight, and then a 16th shuffle, which has a rigid feel to it, but you know, like the tempos, it was a bit different. Triplets, and then the quintuplet one. So I think at that tempo, the triplet feels the most swingy. This quintuplet thing is more of a in-between groove. It's getting quite popular to play things like with kind of a quintuplet division. Let's speed this up, see how it sounds there.
Yeah, I would say just hearing that last one with the quintuplet captured more accurately what that instructor was trying to convey.
Yeah, that's probably what he was talking about because it's been quite a kind of hip thing to think about. Another way to do it. Let me just play it back at this straight. So straight 16th sounds too rigid. This has got a nice swing, and that's definitely an in-between feel. So another way you can experiment with it is if I go and edit those options, clear everything, and just put the 8th note version in. There's also a swing fader, so I can play this. So I can go in here to swing. So I can switch this to triplet swing. So that's the equivalent of playing the first and last of the triplet. Or a 16th swing, which is the first and last of the 16th. Or a 16th triplet swing, which is the first and last of the sextuplet. Or the quintuplet swing, which is the third in between. But also I can tweak this slider in here. So when you get to like this, 27% is probably how I naturally play a shuffle. So it still sounds like a shuffle, and I'm not intentionally doing it. So if I take this to actual triplets, that almost sounds a little kind of straighter than my thing. So I first discovered this in PolyNome. There's a similar thing. If we open up PolyNome, there's a swing fader, and I've seen different music software talk about swing in different ways and have different values that would equate to a triplet swing. The way I did it in PolyNome was, let me just put a straight 8th rhythm in here. And what sound have we got there? So let's put a ride cymbal. Oops. And I'll turn off the click. Okay, so there's your straight version. And then let's turn on the swing. So here I can, so at 10% swing, it does sound a little swung. When you get to 20, I think 20% is the quintuplet version. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Actually, let's just see that. See, I can duplicate this down here. I can put a quintuplet, and let's do the 1, 2. So we'll play, and I'll just duplicate this. Actually, I don't even need to duplicate it, it's going to loop it. So this is playing at 20% swing, and this is playing as written. And so you can see if I adjust the swing here, now you've got the flamming between that. So this is the ride cymbal playing a triplet swing, and the click on down here playing a quintuplet swing. You can kind of hear the difference between them. So my swing system here is that 0% is, sorry, it's on this one up here. So 0% swing is the offbeat note in its normal place, and 100% swing is the offbeat note moved all the way onto the next beat. So it covers everywhere between here and here. So 33% is, a third of the way over that way, which puts it essentially on the let of a triplet. And 50%, if you do them here, it says dotted note. So 50% is on the last 16th note. So this lets you go between them. And I remember just being on the back of the tour bus thinking about my swing and thinking, I would sometimes do practice and put a triplet click on and play along to that. And I think, it feels a bit weird for me. And I figured that my natural shuffle feel is somewhere around sort of 24, 25%. That's what sound, if you didn't tell me what percentage you were on and you just gradually increasing it, that's at which point I'd go, yeah, that's what it is. So I'm not at a triplet. But if you're then going to go and play some fills that are in triplets, it might feel a bit weird if you weren't swinging a straight triplets. I don't know.
Let me offer just something, two thoughts while I'm thinking about it in regards to this swing thing. The first one would have been a comment I either heard directly or I read somewhere that made some sense. It was probably from a veteran player, grew up in an older tradition, but and especially at faster tempos, the whole triplet thing kind of goes out the window in their concept when you consider it's really just straight eighth notes. And again, at a quick tempo, it's the accent on the second one that is giving the illusion of swing or the perception of swing. That might be an interesting construct to replicate in either of these tools. The second item I'd like to bring out while I'm thinking about it is you're probably familiar with the app Drum Genius.
I don't know.
You should look into that. It's a wonderful app that has sampled, now whether it's the actual, and I don't know because of copyright, but it's a plethora of rhythms broken in categories or styles. Let's just say swing, but within swing there'd be medium, slow, fast, at least 4 or 5. And when you pull up one of those presets, you only get a bar, maybe 4 bars tops, but they would always cite the song. They would cite the player. That's okay. They would cite the player itself, And you'll notice that, just like when you listen to we're talking about playing real music here, that you are able to, you can tell if you've listened to any of those drummers, especially as a drummer, oh, that's Art Blakey, that's Jimmy Cobb's beat, that's et cetera, that's Philly Joe Jones's beat. I would be interested in, since you're the drummer, have the rhythmic as your bellwether, that could you dissect say a Paul Motion 160 beats per minute swing feel and translate it, and maybe you would do it via samples, maybe that's coming, who knows, but we're talking about how you're using a slider, and I'm sure it's getting it. You could find that sweet spot where, that's Buddy Rich's swing right there. But I'd love for you to be able to identify and affix a name, say, to the swing feels. Yeah, because it's such a loosey goosey concept.
It is hard. I mean, let's put it in here. I'll just show you how I would play around with it, because one of the features in here, which is the delay faders, I have those in there because I was always interested in people talking about playing behind the beat and ahead of the beat, and people saying, oh, like if you're playing the pocket, like Dennis Chambers would say, the kick and hi-hat is like on the click, but the snare is laid back a little bit. So I wanted to play around with, well, what does it sound like if, metronomically you do that? Does it sound good? Is it noticeable, like in these things? And how does it sound if you're going to delay the snare on, if you're playing hi-hat on eighth notes, for example, and you're going to delay the snare by 10 milliseconds or something, then there's going to be a flam between the hi-hat and the snare. So how's that going to sound? And would you also delay the hi-hat that occurs with that snare so there's no flam but it's still behind the beat? Because people talk about all this stuff, and I've seen guys on instructional videos saying this is on the beat and then this is behind the beat, and it doesn't change. They just like lean back a little bit and it feels different to them, but it doesn't sound any different. So I was always curious about that kind of thing. So I'll do a quick thing with the ride pattern, and then I'll show you that feature. So if I just program in your sort of standard swing pattern, so that's played perfectly straight. Let's take the tempo. So if I take, well, in fact, I can put I'll put an accent on the 2 and 4 here as well, so we can play around with the accent level. And obviously on a drum kit, the cymbal sounds different when you hit it at different velocities and things, and there's more to it than this is just playing the exact same sample, so it's going to sound different. So that's fairly fast tempo, accent in the 2 and the 4. And then if we add, you can swing over here as well, so if we add a little bit of swing, if I go all the way up to, if you long press above the fader, it will jump to kind of set points, so I'll jump to the triplet. So that's triplet swing at 270 BPM, which is fairly fast. And it sounds too tight at that tempo. The triplet is too much. So, but also straight, I think, is too straight. So somewhere in between, like 13%, sounds kind of fairly swingy. So let's bring that tempo right down. That sounds all right. It's got a good swing to it. If I jump to the triplet, definitely has a different feel. And sometimes at slower tempos, so I think generally at slower tempos, you can delay that last note more and more. Let's put it even. That's probably too much. But it's a feel. And obviously in a band setting, it's going to depend on how everybody else is feeling it. So if the drummer was feeling it like that, but somebody else was playing it as trip, well, we can experiment. What does it sound like if I just put a rhythm in here that's just straight. Let's put in a little melody, maybe up an octave from that. Okay, so I haven't tried this before. So that works because the melody is straight and the swing is, you can almost be like a swinging double time into that. So let's put the swing at triplets.
Oh, that's pretty what do I want to say, that's pretty revealing that sounds good, and it's instructive to the melodic player that he's not swinging.
Yeah.
I mean, it gives the argument, because the biggest complaint that I would say veterans of this music who grew up with it when there was an industry for it, bread and butter was made, on a daily level, is that their whole thing was that they're playing straight eighth notes, but it's juxtaposed, or it's a mind concept, which we're playing with the mind a lot here, and perception. Mm-hmm. That if even the melodic player is aware of that accent that drummer is giving on 2 and 4, is propelling that solo, or that interpretation just fine. Don't add any more to it. So that was very revealing, I'd say.
Well, I mean, here, like the melody player here could easily switch between straight eighths and triplets. I'll just put a bar of triplets in playing the same thing, and I'll just set this melody to just reset when the cycle repeats.
Okay.
So now we can hear.
Yeah, this will be interesting. So I would say, hey, can you instead of making that feel like double time, can you have that triplet? Do it at twice as slow, I guess we'd say.
So we got 2 options. Oh, I guess I'll just replace this with this triplet. Duplicate.
Yeah.
Just delete these. So this is based on the underlying thing that we just had. It's just every other note of it.
Yep.
So that works because this is a 2 against 3 type thing, and then this is in the same grid as this.
But I still feel like it's not there yet. That second measure, I'd like to hear it. I'd like to hear it swing like the drummer is. Ba da 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 da.
Oh yeah, I mean it could.
Do those 2 one after the other, and let's just hear. They both may work, but I'm just saying that first one was a revelation because it's playing straight, but it's still swinging.
So this is
da 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 da.
Yeah, so this is gonna go to now bump the tempo up, bump it up, and let's hear it together. That's kind of. Yeah, I mean, they both work. Yeah. Well, what I was going to say was, what I was going to experiment with was, so that we know that straight against swung works. Straight can always be there, and that whoever's swinging can swing wherever they want, and it will work with this. What I was curious about was if we change this degree of swing so that it's not triplets, and then this second half is playing triplets, how does that sound? Does it sound okay if the melody player and the drummer are playing different swing levels? So let's set the swing to where I would play it naturally at, say, 23%. So this is 23% swing and this is 33% swing. Still sounds fine. So I'll play around with the swing of the drums here. I'll bring it down. So the
Oh,
drums, I think what is important then, like you say, that accent, what's important is that there's a pulse, a driving pulse. Um, and as long as the drummer is grooving within himself and the melody, because with the melody, I think of it as being more blurred out in kind of, audible space. Like with drums, when you've got a sharp attack on things, you really notice when things don't align. So bands that have like a slap bass player and a drummer with the drums tuned up really high, if they're not locked in, it sounds messy. But if the bass is like flat wound strings with the fingers and you don't hear the attack so much, there's a lot more um, kind of give in that. I have an example in here somewhere. I think it might be this Billie Jean example. So I programmed this in just to demonstrate the fact that you can have a crappy bass player in a band and a good drummer and it will sound all right. But you can have a crappy drummer and a great bass player and it won't sound that great. So we got the drums, we've got the bass. So what if, with this delay, if you tap on the delay part here, it says you can set the maximum fader delay. So the maximum delay, if I put the fader all the way to the top, is going to be a 16th note. So I am going to set both of these faders at 50%. So these are both playing a 30-second note behind the beat. But they're both doing it, so you can't tell. If I bring in the click, now you can tell. Everything's like behind, right? But they're together. So with this, it allows me to move the drummer a little bit behind or a little bit ahead of the bass player. So if
okay.
you have a bass player, so what's the bass player's in rhythm 1, so that's this fader here. The drummer's on rhythm 2. So I'm going to start by having the bass player get a little bit behind and then catch up, and the drums are going to stay exactly where they are. Bass player's getting later. And even though bass player is now maybe a 64th note behind the drummer, it still sounds kind of passable. Okay, let's bring him the other way. Speeding up. Okay, now the bass player is ahead of the drummer, and that doesn't sound good. And I think my theory here is that the reason is that the bass, if it's because it doesn't have a really sharp attack on it, if it happens after the drums, you can kind of interpret the drum as the attack of the bass, and you're just hearing, that afterwards. So if the bass player is behind the drummer, you don't really notice unless he's slapping and has some top end on that, which would make it sound flammy. But he can be anywhere behind the drummer and it sounds fine. If he's ahead of the drummer, it sounds bad because you hear the attack of the bass followed by the drums. So if I do it 25%, so the bass and the keys are a 64th note ahead of the drums. It sounds kind of bad. But if we put them the other side, a 64th note behind, it sounds way more passable. Okay, and now if I move this fader up and down, that's representative of the bass player like not being able to keep a good tempo. Let's see what it sounds like. It doesn't sound great, but it's sort of passable. Now if I do the same with the drummer, you really I think you really notice a wandering drummer more than you notice a wandering bass player. So that's a bass and drums together, moving, and
Yeah,
like to a degree. So I think my conclusion from this is, if the bass player is somewhat behind the drummer, that's okay. But if they get ahead of the drummer,
yeah.
it doesn't sound good. So in a band situation, the drummer really should be listening to the click or his own time, and just, from my perspective, when I was playing in a band, I shouldn't be listening for where the bass player is and trying to follow him, because
Mm.
the bass player is probably listening for me and trying to follow me. So if we're both listening for each other, then you end up, getting further and further behind. And particularly in arrangements where you go, oh, we want the bass to be behind the drums, you can't be listening for each other. You just have to kind of find where your pulse is and both have your internal time, and then bass player knows to lay behind. But the drummer can't be then trying to lock in with the bass player, otherwise it's a race and you'll slow down.
Now
Um,
that this is really, I mean, this is great. It's hearing is believing, and feeling. Um, that was a wonderful demonstration. Is there an opportunity to do the same with a horn, either with or without the bass? Ideally, it'd be awesome to hook up a trio. I don't know if you can do that, but in lieu of that, can you do the same? You kind of did it earlier there with that other example, but how about a melody instrument with a drummer who's locked in swinging?
um, I mean, yeah, you could just put some. I don't have a horn sound. I only have I have the. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm down here. I have the bass here. So sound wise, you've only got the options really for putting a keyboard or a bass in there. But you could edit this, and actually, I'll leave those.
Yeah, keyboard would be absolutely fine. Any piano or any,
Yeah.
whatever
So
synth.
I'll that's my bass there. I'll just put this up the top. Actually, I'll just delete this too. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. So keyboard, and you've got your scales over here if you wanted to cheat. I don't know what's it's just a little hidden feature with all the scales I could find. Um, so anyway, that's not a great example, but let's see what plays there. So I need to mute so this, let's see how this is if I move the keyboard. That doesn't sound good. I reckon that's passable. A 64th note behind is passable. Let's move him ahead. It just kind of sounds wrong. If anything's before the drums. You notice the flams, I think. But you could close your eyes and like make it bigger. You can close your eyes and try and see when you think they're together and how far behind you can get. I'll make him wonder. He could be playing quintuplets and septuplets. He might be a really clever keyboard player. The other thing I'll just quickly demo, if I'm going to swap these around and clear this and copy the drums down. So I have the same thing up here and down here, but what I'm going to do, I think, is utilize the snare drum down here. So we've got two drum kits playing together, exactly together. If I mute the hi-hat in the second rhythm, so that is here, I'll turn it up in the first one. Got some crying kids in the background. I'm going to mute the kick in rhythm 2 and mute the snare in rhythm 1. So now what we're hearing is this hi-hat and this kick and this snare. You could just program just the snare down here, but this gives me a bit of flexibility. So now I can, if you can hear it over the crying children, delay the snare. Oops. So this is me delaying the snare. So like the hi-hat flams with the snare and really gives that away that it's not in time. Bring it back together. You get away with a little bit. So there's a thing with slapback delay on vocals where, you know, there's a point where if you add a delay to something, to any instrument, it thickens it up like you're in a room. So there's a delay bouncing off the walls in here. So it just makes a clap or a snare hit sound thicker. But, you know, you get a certain distance and your ear interprets it as two instances of something. That's when it starts to sound more like a flam. So I think with just a small, like less than a 64th, you know, whatever, 128th of a delay between that hi-hat and the snare drum, it almost doesn't even sound like a flam, it just sounds like a fat snare. Somewhere like that. But if I go further, delaying the snare, now it starts to sound kind of wrong. You can hear how late it is, and it starts to make the beat feel like wonky as well. And then the other thing you could do, I could just edit this and take out the hi-hat that occurs with the snare. So now this top thing is playing all of the hi-hat notes that aren't with the snare, and down here I'll edit it and play only the hi-hat note that's with the snare. So then we can see if it sounds any better if we delay the snare and the hi-hat so that you don't hear the flam. What did I do there? Something is playing that I didn't want to play. I don't want the snare in that one. Okay, so now I can delay this. So now there's no flams, but you can hear that snare is obviously way too late. So that sounds okay. That's just a very, very tiny delay on the snare. But whether that sounds better or worse than it perfectly together. And then if I bring it ahead so the snare is early, you know, you hear how it sounds. So it's got to be really small things that work, and I would guess that most drummers can't be that accurate, but they just have a natural tendency. There's not many drummers who you could say delay the snare by 10 milliseconds and they could do it perfectly every time. The way I think about it if I'm trying to do it is to actually think about playing a flam with my hands and let that snare be a little late. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it's safer for drummers to just try and play in time, because that's hard enough as it is. So I'm going to have to wrap this up.